This week's PorkBridge session is called Getting the Right Pigs to Market, and we've asked Brandon Fields from PIC to be the guest speaker this week. Brandon was born and raised on a small cattle farm and crop farm in southern Indiana. He went to Purdue University to be an engineer, but quickly realized that that wasn't his love, and he didn't want to abandon his agriculture roots, and he switched his major to animal science. He started working in the Purdue Meat Laboratory, and that's where he really found his passion. He graduated with an animal science degree in 1996 with a special emphasis in meat science through coursework and internships. In 1997, he joined PIC as a pork chain specialist, focusing on in-plant data collection as a part of the PIC program to highlight their genetic value beyond the farm. He soon expanded his role to include tech services, and today Brandon spends his time working with key integrated accounts around the globe to improve hog marketing strategies for maximum profitability, improvements in animal welfare from farm through the plant, and in-plant operational challenges that affect both meat quality and efficiencies. So with that introduction, Brandon, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you much, Ken. Good introduction. Like I said, really just this session is about getting the right pigs to market. So I just want to go through a lot of general things as producers that we really need to focus on to make sure that we are maximizing our profit potential. Certainly in times like these with record high hog prices, it's almost easy to overlook some of the details because everyone, hopefully, is making so much money. But that doesn't mean there's not a whole lot of money being left on the table that we should be capitalizing on, especially now while margins are very well into the positive. So I'm just going to jump over to slide number 3. And that's really what the whole focus is. We need to start with the right plan. If we don't know what our company targets are, we don't really know how we can achieve them. So going to slide 4, when we're talking about taking the right pigs to market, the key here is understanding what is our target or our optimum market weight. There's a lot of different calculators and tools out there in the industry to be used. The example I have on this slide is one of PIC's proprietary programs that helps our customers determine what is their optimum market weight given their specific performance, their input costs such as feed cost, which base market price on their contracts, which packer and packer grid they're selling on, and so forth. There's others out there that are just as easy to use. They each have advantages and disadvantages, but using one of those to help determine where am I going to maximize my profit potential. And keep in mind, maximizing profit does not mean getting the highest lean premium or having the lowest sort loss. It's the total economics of every pig you sell out of your barn and your total margins over feed and housing costs. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about maximizing our total profitability and really the key to getting the right pig to market. So if we jump to slide 5, one more thing I want to point out, and I see it a lot as I work with producers in the industry, is when you set a target market weight and you tell them your optimum market weight given current economics is, for example, 300 pounds. They get so focused on that 300 pounds that they're afraid to have anything weighing 295 or over 305. And that's not necessarily important here, and I'll go through some more information why. But what I'm illustrating on this slide is really having more and more cuts out of your barn, selling over multiple weeks, trying to minimize that variation or have every single pig weighing exactly what that target market weight isn't necessarily the most profitable for your company. The on the bar graph, the bottom line says barn dump. That means that you're just going to go in today and sell every single pig out of your barn, no selection. In that case, given the economics that I ran for this scenario, that barn would have generated, on a 2,400 head barn, would have generated about $47,867. By simply going in and taking one cut from that barn prior, a couple truckloads, you could have increased your margin by almost a little over $5,000. So that definitely is, worth your time to do that. By doing two cuts or marketing over a 3-week period and then a barn dump, you can increase to another $3,000 there to $55,000. Going beyond that, given the way I ran this model, you really don't see a big benefit to it. When you figure in the extra time and labor and possible opportunity costs for holding pigs, it definitely doesn't make a lot of sense. Every situation is going to be different, determined by your economics, your base market price, and how quickly you need to get pigs in the barn. But don't get hung up on, I have to market over 6 or 7 weeks to make sure I maintain that optimum market weight perfectly. There is some leeway with that. And if you go to slide 6, that's really what I'm showing. As we expand variation, as your standard deviation in that market weight gets larger, or as the line on the graph moves to the right, we don't see a big change in what our optimum market weight should be. So we should not say, I have a big variation in my herd, regardless of what causes that variation: genetics, health challenges, nutrition problems, whatever, heat, summer heat, regardless of what it is. When you have a larger variation, you do not necessarily need to adjust what your optimum market weight or your target market weight should be. From the minimal variation to the maximum on this chart, we can see that we're talking less than 10 pounds to an optimum market weight variation. The challenge with variation in your herd is really shown on slide 7. It doesn't change your target weights, but it can significantly impact your profitability. So being able to understand if you do or do not have variation in your herd, and then being able to control it if you do have a large variation, is going to impact your profitability. So understanding that variation, determining the causes, and then controlling them. Again, whether it starts at a genetic variation, whether it's because it took you 3 weeks to fill a 1,200 head barn, so it's an age variation, a simple hog flow, nutrition, airflow, health challenges, whatever it is, if we can control it, it's ultimately going to mean more money in our pockets. Okay? So slide number 8, just to kind of summarize the first part here. All of these factors, your Packer matrix, your weight variation, how you determine to market pigs, your input costs and your efficiencies, they all go into determining what your optimum market weight should be. And they're all factors that need to be considered when you're setting that plan of how to market your pigs most efficiently. The number of barn cuts, it's not always the major factor to determine, at least as long as you still have a few more days before you have to put that next fill into your barn. Reducing the variation, it does make a significant economic impact. We need to remember that. We need to pay attention to it, but it's not going to affect the weight at which we should be averaging our load weight. Average load weights will not change just because variation goes up. And then lastly, we need to get the right pigs out the door at the right time. And that's kind of what I want to focus on for the rest of the talk here, is how do we go about the hands-on and making sure we're getting the right pigs out the door and that it is at the right time as determined by that plan that we've set through our optimum market weight determinations. Slide 10 here, or 9, I'm sorry, slide 9 here, tells you it's just preventing defects. That's the first thing. That's where it needs to start. And if you go to slide 10, it's really understanding the little things, because it doesn't matter how well we're prepared, how good our marketing plan is. If we can't implement it, it's kind of useless. So we really have to understand all those details and how to make that plan work for us and our system. Slide 11, this kind of gives you some of the problems seen in the industry from a study done, and this was done a little over 10 years ago by the University of Illinois and the American Meat Science Association. And they looked at the primary causes for economic loss at the slaughter plant. And you see all these defects. 7% of their losses were from skin problems, where the pig had to be skinned. 14% from abscesses. That is separate from injection sites, which was 3%. Bruising caused 12%. And arthritis, 11%. And then 44% of our carcass losses was through a disease challenge. If you go to slide 12, and you actually put the dollar figure on that, and if we look at the 2002 numbers, and we look at the subtotal, it's $2.29 per market pig in 2002. And if we factor in that as an industry here in the U.S., we slaughter over 100 million pigs per year. So 100 million times $2.29 is a pretty darn significant economic impact to our industry, just from basically trim loss. Things that in a lot of situations we can at least reduce the prevalence of. Slide 13 is a very broad example of some of these issues that are dealt with on a daily basis with slaughter pigs. Many of them are, in my opinion, inexcusable. Some of them it's very difficult to control. And a lot of it probably depends on exactly which sector of the industry you work in. Crypt orchids and rigs, one-testicled pigs, these are just things that were missed. Occasionally they're up inside and get missed, but a lot of times it's just, workers' oversight. Ruptures, hernias, belly busts, whatever you want to call them. Certain parts of that are sanitation at the sow farm level that can be improved. Some of that is genetic. Lots of different causes there, but it just shows it goes all the way back to the sow farm and even genetics of how these pigs are produced and how they're reared and how they're cared for from the moment they're born that can impact our bottom line when we're selling that pig or that carcass to the slaughter plant. Bug bites. Sure, if you have a rainy summer and it's hot, we're going to have some problems with insects, but really, for the most part, this is pretty controllable from just a standard pest control program, mowing the grass around your finisher buildings, and other pest control measures. Diseases and suboptimal health, there's always disease challenges in the pig industry. As much as we might all hope that one day those challenges are eliminated, I think there's going to be new ones that just keep popping up, as we've kind of seen this year. But anything that causes skin lesions, such as erysipelas, that's going to cause carcass loss. Lung adhesions from pneumonia or bad PRRS outbreaks. When that lung gets infected, oftentimes it actually adheres or grows to the lining on the ribs. When they can't remove that at the slaughter plant, they actually have to cut that area of the ribs out, so you lose a significant portion of weight. Injuries. Injuries, to me, are one of the most preventable things. Sure, they're a pig. They are going to hurt themselves. We can't keep every single pig from being injured. But it's little things that we don't look at. Sharp objects, bolts that are stuck out of the wall, or where an old water nipple was and you've still got a bracket on the side of a pen. A pig walks by, the one next to him shoves him into it, he scratches himself, he causes a bruise, maybe it abscesses, those type of things. Tail bites, there's one that's generally preventable through proper barn ventilation and feed management. Biting marks, never mix unfamiliar pigs until you absolutely have to. One of the worst things you can do from a marketing standpoint is sorting out pigs of their original pen the day before you load a truck, putting them into a separate pen just to make truck loading easier. Yes, it does make loading that truck a whole lot easier and smoother, but for that 24 hours, all those unfamiliar pigs are in the pen. They're not doing anything but fighting with each other. They're not eating, they're not growing, and it's going to cause you probably more loss than the extra time would actually save you. Feed withdrawal is another big issue of mine. A lot of people don't think about it so much from a carcass loss or a condemnation standpoint. It's often used as a tool to help improve meat quality a little bit, but really if you're sending that pig to market with a complete full stomach of feed, and if you assume that stomach in that pig can hold upwards of 5 pounds of feed, once you put that pig on the truck, his digestion shuts down. So now you've got 5 pounds of feed in the pig's stomach that he's not converting to carcass weight, that basically is going to get wasted. Beyond that, when you have a full and distended stomach, when they go to open that pig up for the evisceration at the plant, they accidentally cut that stomach, which is swollen and poking out, contents spill out on the carcass. Well, those contents, anywhere there's been contamination, has to be cut off. And that is all done prior to taking the weight of that carcass, and the weight of that carcass is how the producer is paid. So the producer loses the 5 pounds of feed in the stomach plus whatever weight of the carcass was trimmed off afterwards. So a huge economic consideration for that. Slide 14, just some basic examples of the skin damages that we're talking about. You see the fight marks, you see bruises or hematoma. Please, from an animal welfare standpoint, I hope we don't see the stick marks or the slap marks or whatever this tool has been used inappropriately to load the pig. And then worst case, where you see in the bottom right photo, not just did you see the mark on the skin of the pig, it was so deep we caused a bruise into the loin. And so you take the hit twice, not just from the producer side with possible skin loss, but the packing plant at that point it's going to have trimmed off, or the devaluation of the loin because of it. So it really impacts our whole industry. Slide number 15 is another great example. These pictures were taken in South America, so you'll notice a little bit different loading system, but they have a little side ramp that comes off the truck. Well, the gates or the door doesn't come all the way to the edge of that little ramp. You see in the middle photo, it's a perfect place for the pig's leg to fall through. When that happens, you look at the far right picture and you have this huge bruise on the ham at the plant that has to be cut out on the floor. It devalues the ham to the slaughter plant, to the packer, and it also has cost the producer a significant amount of money in the carcass weight that's lost. So again, it's little things to be aware of. Slide number 16. I'm sure we've all seen a splay leg pig, or a pig that slips because we didn't have enough bedding, because it's a manure covered truck floor that wasn't washed properly, or didn't have the right footing or bedding involved. When that pig goes on the truck and its legs splay out like that, if he can't walk off the truck, I'm sure we all know what happens to a non-ambulatory pig at the plant. Producer is severely discounted. That pig may or may not even be allowed into the food chain. In a lot of cases, it's simply destroyed, and that's a complete loss of a perfectly healthy market pig 5 hours prior to that point. So we really need to focus on our facilities and our designs. Slide 17 is the discussion of feed withdrawal. I've already kind of given you some of the background on that, and I really just want to point out that our general recommendation, I really like to see about 18 hours of feed withdrawal. That's kind of the ideal. I would go a minimum of 12 and a maximum of 24 for ideal quality and for improvements in carcass and save on feed wastage. But slide 18, it's selecting the right pigs. We've hopefully gotten them through at this point to a healthy market weight ready pig. They're all in our pens. So the question becomes, how do we get the right ones on the truck? Slide number 19. When you're looking at those pigs and you're choosing out of this pen, which ones do I put on the truck and which ones stay for another week or two, how do you tell? Well, you typically look and you try to determine which pig is biggest. But how do we really know he's the heaviest pig? What is our method? If we move to slide 20, are we using the swag method or the Paduma method? And hopefully we're not. Hopefully we're using well-educated and practiced methodology. But it's startling sometimes when I would work with a customer or go into a finisher site and I ask them, how did you choose? How do you know these are the heavier pigs than the others? And they have absolutely no idea. Or their comment is, well, he kind of looked like he was the biggest. And that's not necessarily the best method. We need to understand, how to select heavier pigs, because that's the ones we want to put on the truck. We don't want the light ones on the truck. We want them to stay and grow. When we look at slide 21, which is heavier? When you look at the blocks, it's pretty easy decision to determine which one's heavier. You count the blocks. There's 8 blocks in both photos. I'm going to guess they're the same weight. But then when you look at the liquids in the photo on the right-hand side, well, now how can you tell? We've got 3 totally different shapes and sizes. You've got a really tall, narrow one, a really low, long one, and something kind of in the middle. So, you go to the next slide, slide 22, the question isn't which is heavier, it's really which one has the greater volume. And slide 23 shows us it's basic math and physics. The volume, or in this case the heavier pig, has the greatest length and width and height. Okay? All 3 dimensions. We assume that the mass or the density of the pig is the same, or we assume that the density is the same, so the one with the most volume has the greatest mass or the greatest weight. It's the old question, which weighs more, a ton of cotton or a ton of bricks? We know from a volume standpoint that ton of cotton is going to take up a lot more space, a lot less density, but it's the trick, it's the mind game. So, going to slide 24 again, which has the greater volume? The liquids on the right are all 3 the exact same volume. So they're all 3 the exact same weight. And that's because we really had to use a 3-dimensional approach. A pig is a 3-dimensional item. From that standpoint, a lot of people will try and say, oh, you need to use tape, and it's, snout to tail length, or you use a girth tape, or some type of calipers to look at the width of the pig. All those are dealing with 2 dimensions, not 3. So in all those cases, you have a lot of room for error in your selection. So looking at slide 25, again, we ask which pig weighs more. Well, we're looking at 2 dimensions. We can tell which pig is taller and which pig is longer, but from this photo we have no idea which one is wider, which is a component that we still need to put all 3 of them together. But by understanding that, I think we do a lot better at selecting our market weights than just going in and picking the tallest pigs in a pen or the ones that are the longest. because often those are not the heaviest overall pigs in the pen. So it increases our economic loss at the plant through higher sort loss, as well as our production performance at the farm, because those 300 plus pound market ready pigs should be going, and instead they might be staying, and their poorer feed conversion hurts you at your production numbers at the farm as well. Slide 26, when we go to that, it's the basics of pig movement. So hopefully at this point they're healthy, they're uninjured, and we know that we've got the biggest pig, but now we have to get that pig out of the pen and onto the truck. So, I really want to go through the general science, because I think it's important to understand the science behind the practice before we go to the actual practice. Slide 27, we're dealing with muscles and muscle motion and the energy required for those muscles to move the animal. And muscles need energy to work. And we get this from three very basic ways. You have onboard energy reserves. You have energy sitting in your muscle right now, ready to work, which is why your brain can tell you to raise your hand, and you can do it instantly. You don't have to wait for your body to generate energy and then raise your hand. Another method is aerobic metabolism. That's how this energy is commonly replaced and put into your muscles to start with. And aerobic means with oxygen. The last is anaerobic metabolism. And this is what happens when your body works really hard or the system runs out of oxygen. Anaerobic means without oxygen. So in slide 28, we come forward to, as we said, the muscles carry this small amount of oxygen readily available. It's there for work. And that's ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. That's just the chemical name. It's not necessarily important. But slide 29 tells you, as we continue to use up this ATP, or this energy in our muscles, we have to get more. And the quickest way to get more is through metabolism, the anaerobic metabolism. So it's taking the carbohydrates, or the sugars that are in the muscle, and it's converting them. To slide 30, you see that it converts those carbohydrates to more ATP, or energy, and you get a byproduct of lactic acid. Okay? There's other things going on, but this is the primary focus of what's happening. We take sugar, we take carbohydrates, in this case it's normally glucose, and that body converts that to the energy, or ATP, and lactic acid byproduct. If you go to slide 31, the body can neutralize this lactic acid, but not always fast enough. Okay? Slide 32, when this builds up, the pH lowers in the body becomes what we call acidotic. And really all that means, if you want to think about it in your own body and what happens, if you haven't exercised in quite a while, and you say, all right, it's time to go to the gym and get healthy, and you hit the weights or the treadmill, your body does the same thing. It takes up all that stored sugar, it builds up, it converts that into energy to keep you working out, but it builds up an awful lot of lactic acid. And this is why your muscles cramp, and this is why you're sore the next day after a workout. The same thing happens to that pig who spent his entire life in a 25 by 25 pen, and now you have to run him all the way down from one end of the barn to the other, load him up a ramp on a truck where he's fighting with other pigs, unload him at the slaughter plant. Again, he goes into a larger pen with more unfamiliar pigs, so more potential for fighting. He gets sore. He cramps up. He doesn't want to move because his muscles hurt, just like you would. When we look at slide 33, this is what happens when we deal with fatigued pigs, and what often leads to our downers, or our non-ambulatory pigs. You have that normal pig. You apply some stress to him, such as moving him out of his pen and loading him on the truck. This pig starts, he gets out of breath. He's open mouth breathing. Possibly he starts to get some skin discoloration, like pink or purple splotches on the skin, and ultimately he just refuses to move. anybody who's ever loaded pigs on a truck has seen this. That pig doesn't want to go anywhere. The question becomes, at this point, what do we do with it? Do we leave him alone, or do we apply more stress by essentially trying to force him on the truck? 95 out of 100 times we apply more stress because we're in a hurry and that pig's not cooperating. So when we apply more stress, we get abnormal vocalizations, or the pig starts to squeal. It's possible he starts to have muscle tremors, or he stands there and shakes, and I'm sure many of us have seen this. Worst case, the pig collapses. He's completely fatigued. He falls down, lays down, he can't get up. Now we have a very critical decision, because if we do apply more stress at this point, we've got a dead pig, and dead pigs aren't worth anything to us. So understanding how this process works, understanding the proper animal flow, and what we can do as animal caretakers is critically important to eliminating, or at least reducing, the incidence of these downer or non-ambulatory pigs, and certainly deaths. Slide 34 just kind of shows us where the industry has been going with this at the plant. When you look at the number of dead pigs at USDA inspected plants, you see we got really high in the late 90s and early 2000s. This is when all the genetics companies were using halothane gene positive pigs, or pigs with the stress gene. It was fantastic from a lean percent standpoint. Huge, heavily muscled pigs. Lean premiums through the roof. But we had, almost 0.3% dead pigs. And that's way too high to be acceptable. Genetics companies realized this. They eliminated the halothane gene from their herds. But you can see our incidence of DOA pigs never really came back to where it was in the early 90s. There's a lot of contributing factors to this. Yeah, they're bigger. We've got different feed additives that may or may not affect it. We can argue that people forgot how they should handle pigs. So you can see it is still improving. It's still a work in progress. As an industry, we are doing better. There's a lot of things that can be done. Slide 35 is just a very basic example of something that PIC is doing genetically, where we're actually selecting pigs for increased physical fitness, or resilient to or stress-resistant type pigs, by monitoring that blood lactate. All in all, it means that those pigs should be able to be handled, to not stress, to move easier, and continue to cause that incidence of dead and downer pigs or non-ambulatory pigs to decrease. Slide 36. We've talked about the science of pig movement. Now let's talk about the application, which is probably more what you guys really want to hear about. What can I actually do? How should I change my behaviors as a pig handler to improve the situation? Slide 37, I think we've all seen this. Anybody's ever heard or seen Dr. Temple Grandin talk about animal welfare? This slide is in every presentation I've ever seen her give on moving pigs. And it's basically, in my opinion, common sense, but something that a lot of people don't think about. It's the flight zone of a pig, where you should stand to cause a pig to move forward. And as simple as this sounds, I wish I had $1 for every person I've seen standing directly in front of a pig and expecting the pig to move forward and just simply go around them, rather than that person moving around the pig to get the pig to move. So we need to understand it. We need to think about it. And to simplify it, I use the example on slide 38. To me, when I relate to pigs and I try to understand pig behavior, it's just like when I try to understand my 4-year-old. Okay? They're not rational. They get distracted very easily. And sometimes they really make you lose your temper. And the issue or the concern is, what do we do and how do we deal with that? We should treat the pig exactly like we do our 4-year-old children. And we need to understand, why their behavior is not what we want it to be, and look for a solution. instead of simply demanding that they change behavior with no explanation or no understanding. So the irrational behavior, look at slide 39. When we're loading pigs on a truck at night, and some of us load at night because of early morning dock times, as winter's approaching, there's going to be a whole lot of us loading in the dark simply because it's going to be dark at 4 p.m. So we look at it and we just see, all right, here's a nice lighted ramp going right up into the truck. It makes perfect sense to us. You just go right up, crawl in. But when we think back to that, how we deal with our 4-year-old child, this is no different than the dark closet. Okay? We see a black hole we can easily rationalize, but the pig or the child isn't rational. They see what you see on slide 40, which is the monster in the closet. They don't know what's there. They can't see, so therefore there's fear. You should always light the inside of your trailer, have the lights pointing to where it's bright inside. Now, slide 41. Here's a light inside the trailer, but it's not necessarily the right way. It's shining directly in your eyes. So slide 42 again tells us how the pig might see that. Looks like a train coming down a tunnel. When I'm talking to producers a lot of time, I tell her that bright light staring at them is much like a policeman shining a flashlight in your eyes and telling you to come here. You really don't want to go there. And so we need to give them a reason to do that. Slide 43. To us, to a rational adult, this little step up from the ramp to the truck doesn't look like much. But if you think about your 4-year-old child trying to climb stairs or jump off a curb, and then we go to slide 44 and think about the pig, it's a whole lot larger to them than it is to us. So it might seem like 8 inches, that pig can just jump right up there. That pig doesn't want to jump right up there because it's scared of it. Okay? So we have to think about these things from that perspective, from a child's perspective, and really change the environment to suit the animal rather than expecting the animal to simply adapt to the environment. Slide 45. Remember where I said that the kid or the pigs, they can really make you lose your temper? This is absolutely the wrong thing to do. And, you've got a hot shot. Just because you didn't shock the pig doesn't mean it can't be used excessively and inappropriately. So we have to keep those things in mind dealing with the pigs. Keep a calm, level head. All right. Slide 46. Let's get that pig out of the pen on the truck. Slide 47. The transport. Really what I want to say about this is we need to understand the whole process. Time to load a truck is not a good metric. Okay? I'll go through some reasons why in a little bit. But, I strongly encourage avoiding electric prod use. It can influence your pH, or it can cause lactic acid to build up, which is those muscle cramps. You do have to understand your load size and space allowance. As we are dealing with heavier pigs in our industry, you can't put the same amount of pigs on a truck. It just physically doesn't work that way. So we have to adjust accordingly. The load crew, the number of people in the load crew, or how experienced they are, can make a huge impact on it. Well-experienced people, 3 or 4 people to get the work done right makes a difference. Your truck driver makes a difference. Maybe some of you are truck drivers. How they drive is a huge impact on the end result of the pig. If they're driving around corners, on rails, pigs are slamming back and forth all over the place, well, then you've got problems. You're going to have bruises. You're going to have injuries that are going to affect you. And weather conditions. Take more time in inclement weather, for transport. If it's cold, make sure your slats are in so you're not getting frostbite on your pigs. If it's hot, make sure the pigs are packed looser and all the slats are out for airflow so the pigs aren't overheating. Slide 48. I hope this isn't what your load crew feels like when it's time to put pigs on a truck, but I know a lot of people do feel like it's this kind of a rodeo, and the best way to do it is just grab the pig and go. Slide 49, just another summary of that load crew and how they should run 3 or 4 people, really recommend people specialize when loading trucks. Some are going to be better getting pigs out of a pen than others. Some are going to be better running that pig up the ramp than others. Wherever a person fits, that should be their job. And let them specialize and learn the techniques for that system. And every barn design is going to take a little bit different strategy. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Okay. Slide 50, what affects the pig movement and time to load? Remember I said time to load is not a good metric. It's the ease of loading. And really what we're dealing with is pigs, and pigs are a biological organism, and pigs are no different than humans, and every one of us is different. It's an easy question to answer on slide 51. Who's faster? Some pigs are just going to move faster than other pigs. So we have to understand that. Just because they all pretty much look alike, we can't expect them to all be exactly alike. Slide 52. When you look at these two photos, which one are you going to force on a truck? Are you going to force 337-pound B.J. Raji from the Green Bay Packers on a truck? Probably not if he doesn't want to go. And current market, 337 pounds is a pretty good-sized market hog that a lot of us are working with on a daily basis right now. And we should understand that no matter how forceful we get, that pig's not going to go on that truck till we want him to. So it's up to us to figure out how to encourage them to go on, not force. Same thing, when you look at a group of pigs on slide 53, it's no different than these two groups of football players. And I want to point out, the big guys, the linemen, they're not any less of an athlete. They're not any less physically capable than your wide receivers and running backs. But the difference, your linemen are 300 to 320 pounds. Your linemen are exactly the type of pig, from a weight standpoint, that many of you are putting on a truck now. The wide receivers and running backs, they're 250, 260 pounds. They're what you were dealing with a couple years ago. Nobody is going to expect the lineman on a football team to run the 100-yard dash in the same time as a wide receiver or a running back. And this is why we should not expect 300 to 320-pound pigs to load on a truck just as quickly as the 260-pound pigs. They're just not physically identical. There's nothing wrong with the pig, it just takes them a little more time. So slide 54, which group are you going to load on a truck faster? Clearly the group on the right, the smaller hogs. They're just more nimble. Slide 55, which group are you going to put on the truck faster? Well, it should be the group on the left, the smaller number of pigs. For one, it's simply a smaller number. And for two, you run into situations like on slide 56. When we start moving large numbers of pigs at one time, where does the problem with pigs always occur? It occurs at the front of the line, where if you move to slide 57, when we're the pig handler in the back, we can't do anything about it. Yet if we have a situation that looks like it does on slide 58, small number of pigs, one person moving pigs, you can reach up with your paddle, even with your hand if you have to, and touch that pig that's turned around the wrong way, that's causing the problem, that's balking, rather than relying on all the rest of them behind him to just shove him through, which is what happens in many cases. Slide 59, just some examples of proper pig handling tools. Again, I really want to point out the electric prod is still an acceptable tool for handling pigs, although I strongly discourage its use in almost every situation. I will acknowledge that there are times it is needed, or that it will significantly improve, especially loading of a truck. Yet at this point, there should be, if you remember my loading crew suggestions, people specialize, there should be one person specialized, trained on the use of a hot shot, not using it on every single pig, only using it on those pigs that are causing problems, and being trained to realize when too much is too much and stop and do something different. Because continuing to shock the pig time and time and time again with that pig not reacting, it's not getting anybody anywhere. So something else needs to be worked out. My personal favorite tools for moving pigs, the sorting board and the livestock paddle, the rattle paddles. I think those are fantastic tools for getting pigs out of a pen, for moving them down alleyways and on a truck. If you are dealing with long alleys or for whatever reason you are required to move larger groups of pigs, I really like the flag. There's something about waving that flag over the backs of pigs that really kind of gets them moving forward. So that's another good tool to explore for use in your situation, in your farms. Slide 60, we've talked about a lot of things. I've given a lot of recommendations, but this is something I stand by, is always let the data decide. You should always track your performance. You should have data. And, when I look at the photo on this slide, I would think this is too many pigs on a truck. And my recommendation, just from seeing this photo or from being on site at this facility, would be to tell the company, well, maybe you need to back off 5 or 6 pigs on your truckloads. They're extremely crowded. But by having data, we could review the performance of this system, and when I reviewed the performance of this system, they didn't have any problems with DOAs. Their DOAs were 0.002%. That's not a problem. They had no concerns whatsoever. So in this case, even though it doesn't look exactly like we think it ought to, the data tells us there's no problem, it's not broke, so don't try to fix it. Now, when we are talking about loading and unloading pigs on slide 61, we do need to be aware of the injuries that they have as they're scraping their feet, as they're getting sore from banging around. It will cause issues with the loading and unloading process. So it comes back to the statement, we really need to inspect our facilities, find out any issue, any location where a pig may or may not be injured, and remove that. Any obstacles that they're having to jump over that are going to cause the injuries, we don't want to cause injury to the pig, which is going to prevent them from moving, which may eventually cause them to be a non-ambulatory pig, which ultimately costs us money. That's the bottom line. There might be a few of us here who are doing this job just because we love pigs, but most of us are doing it to make money. And so anything that's going to affect the bottom line is something that we need to be concerned about. So wrapping up the presentation here, slide 62, if you look at the key points and if you could take anything home from what I've been talking about, it's kind of these points. First and foremost, have that company plan that really focuses on your optimum market weight for your system. Know how to make the most money before you ever try to do it. Know that plan. Second point is really take care to avoid those trim losses and injuries. That is easy money if you can reduce your trim loss. And it's basic things like facilities, maintenance and upkeep, and then the proper pig handling and welfare that doesn't cause the injuries or the down pigs. And to do that is kind of the third point here. It's understand the basics of proper pig handling to improve pig movements. Understand what changes you can make in your daily routines or your facility design that's going to improve that pig handling. Understanding that bigger pigs just simply take more time. They're still capable. They shouldn't be rushed. They should be given the time to move properly, and that's going to mean a lot more money in the long term to your company. And with that, I'll go to slide 63 and simply thank all of you for your time listening here and give a huge thanks to the pig for supplying one of my all-time favorite foods, which is bacon. So maybe it's lunchtime for a lot of you. You might be thinking of baking yourself, but we'll see what questions we have, and then we can all head that direction. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Brandon, for a wonderful talk this afternoon. I know that I picked up a lot of things, and just a lot of nice reminders there for a lot of us there. I'd like to thank Brandon again for the wonderful talk and answering the questions. Just again, a lot of good information today. Thank you, Brandon.